What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Putback with Ian Begley free agency special. I'm Chelsea Sherrod alongside SNY NBA insider Ian Begley. We will examine every angle of the Knicks offseason as free agency officially gets underway in just a few minutes at 6 p.m. Joining us tonight is Dan Graca of 98.7 FM ESPN Radio. Love having you on, Dan. Good to see you. But in a bit, we'll also be joined by Shaun Gettys of the Knicks Wall. And of course, you can get in the conversation as well. Ask your questions in the comment section, and we'll get to them throughout the show. So, guys, we have a lot to get into. The Knicks have some pressing questions that they're going to have to answer. I can only imagine that they'll be answering them sooner rather than later. But, Ian, to start things off, what are some things to watch out for as free agency opens up?
Yeah, I think early on, keep an eye out for Isaiah Hartenstein and some big offers that are expected to come his way. Not exactly sure which teams they're coming from. I know Orlando has been in the mix, but the expectation for a while now has been that Hartenstein is going to get some significant offers, some longer-term offers possibly, and that's a big deal because the Knicks can only offer Hartenstein a $16 million salary in year one and a 4-year, $72 million contract overall because they have his early bird rights. So teams with cap space like the Magic can come over the top and really make Hartenstein make a really tough decision. So I think that's still on its way. That's something to keep an eye out for. And look, I think if you look at the numbers, I think people would be surprised if Hartenstein decided to take less to come to New York. I think the expectation is it goes the other way. And then the Knicks would need to go out and get a backup center behind Mitchell Robinson. So you keep an eye on that. And then, there are other things out there with the Knicks. They are in that center market. They expect to be in that center market if Hartenstein leaves. And also, they need to make another trade here to make the money work for their cap situation. So, you could sign and trade a Precious Achiuwa, sign and trade an Alec Burks. I think those are possibilities. One thing that I don't think is a possibility, the Knicks have very little appetite in including Miles McBride in that Bridges deal. McBride's salary would make it work pretty easily, but there is very little interest in including McBride. They like McBride. So I think it would be one of the other guys. And I think all along the Knicks have been pretty confident that they'd be able to get that Bridges deal done, and that would allow them to get over that first apron, to exceed that first apron hard cap. So that's a couple of things to look out for the Knicks early on here.
Yeah, that Bridges news is the latest. But Ian, going back to Isaiah Hartenstein, because this is a pressing issue for the Knicks. This is a two-parter for you, though. How much of a priority is it for the Knicks to possibly re-sign him, given all that he did for them this past season and just the team chemistry that they have as well? And the second part of that is, who are some of these other big men on the free agent market that the Knicks could possibly pick up?
Yeah, it would be a huge priority for the Knicks to bring him back. They'd love to bring him back. I just think that they might be stuck in a collective bargaining agreement situation where they just can't come close to offering what Hartenstein's going to command on the open market. I mean, take away Nick Claxton. He's the top center on the free agent market, and there are teams with cap space, again, who are interested. So losing Hartenstein would be a big deal, but I don't think it would be about the Knicks not wanting him back or him not wanting to return to New York. Listen, this is his first big shot at free agency. He's hitting it at just the right time, coming off a great season. So it would, I think everybody would probably go for the money when you look at what the difference is between the offers that he's expected to get and what the Knicks are limited in offering him. So again, if he decides to take a haircut and come back to New York, he'd be a conquering hero. It would just surprise some people if that happened. Then you look at the backup center market. Andre Drummond is somebody that have been on the Knicks radar. I think that, they'll have interest, but I assume that he can go out and get more money elsewhere. The Knicks would be limited to a $5 million exception. Jonas Valanciunas, I think, is a name to keep an eye on, too. He'd be, again, taking a big pay cut if he took that $5 million exception from the Knicks. But I do think that there's something there, something to keep an eye on. The Lakers are going to be in on Valanciunas as well. But the bottom line is the Knicks need to find a competent backup big if Hartenstein leaves, because you still have Mitchell Robinson, but Mitchell Robinson has been dealing with injuries almost every year of his career. So you really need somebody who can go in there and start 30 games over the course of a season. So that's going to be a big task for the Knicks if they do lose Hartenstein as expected.
Yeah, Mitchell Robinson, we're going to get to him in a little bit, but Andre Drummond, a Connecticut guy, maybe being closer to home could be appealing to him. But Dan, coming to you, same type of question. How much of a priority do you think it is for the Knicks to keep Isaiah Hartenstein if they can?
Well, Chelsea, I think it's huge. I mean, really just to piggyback off of what Ian said, and a lot of that has to do more on Mitchell Robinson, right? It's not necessarily, the type of player Hartenstein is, and it was really nice to see him come into his own last year, because if we think back to a couple of years ago when the Knicks signed him, it was kind of just like, okay, journeyman player, come off the bench, play about 15, 20 minutes, grab some rebounds, do that type of thing. We really didn't expect much. But then last year when he was summoned to play the heavy minutes after Mitchell Robinson went down early in the season, and it seemed like certainly he was up to the task, and because of that, he set himself up here for a nice big payday, and he should absolutely go out there and chase it, which, like Ian's saying, I'm a little bit skeptical about his return to the Knicks because, you know what, $72.5 million is great money for, the average Joe out there, but for Isaiah Hartenstein, comparative to some of the numbers that are being thrown around, to other players, like, for example, you saw what Nick Claxton's reportedly going to re-up for there in Brooklyn. If that's the case, Hartenstein should chase the money, and he deserves every last penny of it, but it would be a big hole for this team because one thing you could say about Mitchell Robinson is, yeah, he's talented. Yeah, he's gotten a little bit better over the years since he was a raw project once upon a time, but the guy just can't stay healthy. And for a team now, like the Knicks, with championship aspirations, you can't just have a guy along for the ride who you can't count on because also you re-signed OG Anunoby, gave him huge money, and he's also an injury-prone player. To have two of those guys in your lineup at the same time, that's asking a lot to me over the course of a long season throwing the playoffs.
Yeah, Dan, quick follow-up for you here. Like I asked Ian, if Hartenstein does go elsewhere, how do you think the Knicks will shore up the backup center position? Who are you seeing on the free agent market that they can pick up?
Yeah, I like the names that Ian threw out there as well. But even, what about a guy like Mason Plumlee, for example? He's a big, does the dirty work, grabs some rebounds. I don't know economically what the cost would be, but he could be somebody that would maybe fit into the puzzle. Remember, he played in the area as a member of the Brooklyn Nets, so he has familiarity with the whole New York scene. But let's be honest. I mean, the guys, more often than not, the guy that the Knicks are going to have to go out there and acquire to replace an Isaiah Hartenstein if he leaves, it's going to be important because the front court depth right now for this basketball team is something, in my opinion, that leaves a lot to be desired, especially if you lose Hartenstein.
Yeah, Dan, you just mentioned one guy, OG Anunoby, who got a really big payday by the Knicks. And just switching gears here to you, Ian, how did the OG Anunoby re-signing come together? What can you tell us about that?
Yeah, Chelsea, I want to get into that, but just first thing is I just want to make note, keep an eye on Dallas here for Klay Thompson. People that are monitoring that situation feel like the Mavs think they are in a good spot and can be aggressive in getting Klay Thompson. So keep an eye there. That would keep him out of the Eastern Conference, so probably a decent thing for the Knicks. But another thing in the East here is Philadelphia. They are trying to create even more cap space than they already have. I think they're considering maybe waiving a player or two, and that would allow them to not only get a player like Paul George, but they could bring in a second big money player. And so I think that's on the table for them. Obviously, a lot of moving parts, but keep an eye on that too. With OG Anunoby, and the Knicks always had prioritized bringing Anunoby back, right? They had given up R.J. Barrett, they had given up Emmanuel quickly to get Anunoby in New York, and then Anunoby, he was just fantastic when he was on the floor. The record the Knicks had when he was out there. The concern, of course, is with injuries. Dan mentioned it earlier. He's had a history of injuries, but the Knicks always wanted him back, and I think that what it came down to is Anunoby, I think, would have gotten max offers from opposing teams, including Philadelphia. The Knicks knew that, and so they were aggressive in their offer, the $212 million overall, a big money offer, aggressive offer, not the max, but Anunoby could have made, I believe, more annually if he went to another city. So there were threats there. The Knicks knew there were threats, so they went ahead and went where they needed to go contract-wise to bring Anunoby back.
Yeah, and Dan, you mentioned it before, OG Anunoby's, health issues, his injury history. Given all of that has happened with him, how do you feel about the 5-year deal that he signed?
Well, I mean, it's a lot of money. It's a lot more money than, was being tossed around initially about OG Anunoby. Remember the days when you thought maybe 4 years for 140 was going to be able to get it done for OG? Well, he just absolutely skyrocketed past that number because, you know what, that's what the market dictated, and more power to him. But, if you would have asked me once upon a time, would OG Anunoby be the guy who received the richest contract in the history of the Knicks franchise, I would probably say definitely not, because he's not exactly even a top 10 player in franchise history. But that's the common market, and you have to kind of roll with the punches here a little bit. But I keep coming back to the word imperative, because he is absolutely essential for this team. You know what the wins and losses record was when he was in the lineup here, but health wise, again, it seems like a broken record. We talked about it with Mitchell Robinson. I mean, 3 out of the last 4 years, you're talking about a guy who didn't play more than 50 games. And, I mean, you talk about just his absence alone. I think if he doesn't get hurt in that Indiana series, you're talking about the Knicks advancing at least to the Eastern Conference Finals. So it would be nice to have a healthy OG Anunoby, and I don't know what that contract is going to look like, let's say, in the final couple of years of it, if the injuries continue to mount. But at least for right now, championship contending team like the Knicks have built, you have to keep them in the fold, and they did that.
Yeah, and I think this is just like another sign of where the market is moving, just how you both were mentioned. But yeah, a huge payday for OG Anunoby. Ian, I kind of want to come to you a little bit on just these aprons and things like that. So what kind of considerations do you think that the Knicks need to make when it comes to freeing up some money to avoid getting hard capped at the first apron?
Chelsea, I thought we were getting Bobby Marks for this one. He's not coming on.
He didn't want to come
out. I got some
with
aprons
us,
in the kitchen, some cooking aprons I can spring out. A first one, a second one,
So basically, the Knicks, their trade for Mikal Bridges, right? They are taking back more money than they're sending out, and that automatically would cap them in a certain amount of team salary, around $178 million. It's called the first apron. But the Knicks already have about, I think, 172 in committed team salary. So they can't be kept at that first apron and fill out this roster. What they need to do is add money to that Bridges deal. And that's why, we're talking about things like a Precious Achiuwa sign and trade and Alec Burks sign and trade, even a Miles McBride unlikely deal, but because they need to add salary to this trade so they can avoid that hard cap at the first apron. If they can do that, then they'll get capped at the second apron, but that's $11 million more, I think, than the first apron. So it gives them a lot more flexibility to go out and make moves. And maybe coincidentally, maybe not, it also would give them enough room to make Hartenstein their max offer, which again starts at $16.1 million. So yeah, I think no matter what, you can be pretty sure that the Knicks will add money to that Bridges deal so they have some more financial flexibility to fill this roster out.
Yeah, and Dan, Ian said at the top of the show that the Knicks really want to hold on to Miles McBride. So how important do you think it is for the Knicks to keep that depth?
I'd like to hold on to him too, right? Because he showed you enough flashes there in the postseason that, when called upon, he can give you big minutes in big spots. To be thrown into the fire like that, like he was, especially a guy late in the season who was kind of like nailed to the bench, and then to be summoned to play because of all the injuries, I thought that he responded about as well as he can. Now, you look, I mean, he ran out of gas there a little bit, I think, like some of those other players did, but he showed you the potential that he has, and the Knicks rewarded him with that at the end of the year, which, by the way, it's interesting, right? I don't know if it's necessarily a coincidence, but they signed him to that extension on December the 30th, which means you can't trade him possibly for 6 months after the contract is signed. Lo and behold, 6 months into the future is today, as a matter of fact. So the Knicks gave themselves some wiggle room if indeed they had to trade Deuce for whatever reason it was. But I'd like to hold on to him. I really did like the Tyler Kolek pick. From Marquette. Watched a lot of him, of course, in college at the Big East. Played some big games at Madison Square Garden, but I don't know if that's a guy that you're immediately going to thrust in there as a rookie and expect him to play meaningful minutes for you. You have other options out there in free agency, but as of now, if you gave me my druthers, I'd like to hold on to Deuce McBride unless, and I'll say unless, it means freeing up that money, and if you're assured that Isaiah Hartenstein is going to put pen to paper and re-sign.
I think that's definitely a consideration. Sorry, Ian, go ahead.
No, that's the dilemma right now for the Knicks, and that's kind of where it sits right at this very moment. Again, expecting Hartenstein to get several big-time offers, and then he'll have a big decision to make, and we'll see where he goes. But I just think the money where it's expected to be for him elsewhere and where it could be in New York, it's going to be a pretty big gulf.
Yeah, for sure. And just to reiterate, Ian's reporting that the Knicks have virtually no interest in including Miles McBride in the Mikal Bridges trade. And switching gears to Mikal Bridges, Dan, what makes the Knicks and the Mikal Bridges such a perfect fit in your eyes?
Well, I mean, he went to college with half the team. Let's start there, right? I mean, that's a pretty good comfort level and familiarity and all those things. And how about the fact, guys, that, look at the contract that he's still playing under, right? 2 more years. I mean, that's pretty affordable when you're talking about a guy who's making, 23 and 24 and change over the last 2 years of this contract, which for a player of his ilk, and you think about some of the money that's being thrown around here, I think that certainly plays into the Knicks' favor. But what it means to this team, both ends of the floor, that he can score. But now defensively, you take Mikal Bridges, you combine that with OG Anunoby. Both of these guys, I mean, you can make the argument that is maybe the best 1-2 combo of wing defenders you have in the NBA, right? You go to war with that group probably against any tandem across the league. And it's a wing game. I think we all know that there are a couple of guys who wear green uniforms up to the north that just lifted a trophy a week ago. That is what you're gunning for right now, and finding ways to stop them. Having a healthy OG paired with Mikal Bridges. And, oh, by the way, Mikal Bridges' last game he missed was in high school. You don't have to worry about injuries or durability with him. That's also a major plus.
Yeah, we know Tom Thibodeau is so excited for that. He loves to talk about how many minutes his guys play. But Ian, coming to you quickly, how much does the Bridges acquisition improve the Knicks on the floor, just following up on what Dan said?
Oh, exponentially. Like, this is what you want if you're an NBA team at this moment. You want 2 strong wing defenders. Knicks have them in Mikal Bridges, OG Anunoby. I mean, look at Boston. Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown. It's a lot to handle defensively, but when you have a Bridges and an Anunoby, if they're both healthy, you have a pretty good matchup there. So, yeah, this was a massive get for New York. It was something that I don't think they thought was possible for a long time. I mean, every time they had checked in with Brooklyn, I think they either didn't hear back or didn't get a real engaged response. And so leading into what happened the night before the draft, I think they thought it would be more of the same where, they make a call and nothing comes back. But in that instance, Brooklyn came back and said, hey, we've got an offer right here and it's better than yours. And the Knicks figured out what they needed to do to go past that offer, and they obviously make the Godfather offer to the Nets. Nets cannot refuse it. So getting Bridges is really, really big for this club. There's some moving parts still. There's some different ways that it can fit, but that was a massive, massive get for the Knicks in addition to re-signing Anunoby.
Yeah, I mean, it's huge. How many guys can say that they basically played with their entire college roster in the NBA? Like, it's unheard of, honestly. All right, guys, let's talk a little bit about front office strategy here. Ian, coming to you, what have you thought about the Knicks front office's strategy over the past couple of seasons?
How can you not say it's been sound? I mean, I'll go back to that summer where they signed Jalen Brunson because they traded a few players that they had signed the previous year and included draft compensation in those trades just to get off of the salary so they had enough money to offer Brunson. At that time, I thought this is a big moment for Leon Rose. It's sink or swim because he really put himself out there by doing what he did to get Brunson. And obviously it's paid off in spades. It's gone as well as I think anybody thought it would, maybe outside of Jalen, Leon Rose, and Rick Brunson, because he has single-handedly turned this franchise into where it is right now. And maybe not single-handedly, maybe that's not fair, but he's been the driving force behind it. And then you look at the subsequent moves, trading for Josh Hart, trading for OG Anunoby, re-signing Anunoby, even signing Isaiah Hartenstein. I think you got to give him credit there because they signed him to a number that's well below what he's going to get on his next contract. So, yeah, a lot of things have worked out well for this front office. I think at the very least, you have to talk about how competent they've been in getting the Knicks to this place.
Yeah, we've come away, since Kemba Walker and Evan Fournier that summer, right? And it's really been pointing in the right direction since. And, everything that Ian just mentioned and, even throwing a guy like Dante DiVincenzo last summer. Think about, what Dante DiVincenzo is getting paid right now and how much of an impact he had for this team. This is a guy who was supposed to come off the bench. He ends up being thrust into a starting role, sets the franchise record for most three-pointers in a season. So, there was a point last year in the playoffs, DiVincenzo, Jalen Brunson, both of those guys playing at quote-unquote discount rates, certainly Brunson, given the star power that he's magnified to. But that's all Leon Rose's handiwork. You know what I mean? And putting these pieces together for the greater good of the team and the fit. That's the most important part of this whole thing. I mean, it's nice to have all these shiny new toys, but is the fit going to be there? And I think that was conveyed certainly with the OG trade with Toronto, and I think piece by piece, he's brought in guys who are the right fit for this basketball team. Maybe not the biggest stars, but that's why we're talking about a team right now that is under that championship umbrella window right now.
Yeah, and chemistry pays dividends. All right, I think Shaun Gettys is now here. Shaun, thanks for joining us, man. We've been waiting for you to come in and talk some Knicks with us. Thanks so much for being here, Shaun Gettys of Knicks Wall. Shaun, we're going to go back to Isaiah Hartenstein because I'd love to hear from you on how much of a priority you think it is for the Knicks to keep Isaiah Hartenstein.
First off, hi, guys. Pleasure to be here. Honored to be here.
What's up, Shaun?
What's up, Shaun?
Hey, guys. As far as Hartenstein, I think it's a priority in the way that if it happens, it's a perfect offseason. Like, no notes, you feel me? Everything's super excited, nothing to lament going into next year. I don't want to take away from the importance. I think that if we were to go out there with the team we have now and add like a somewhat serviceable big as a backup, that we would be okay. So I won't be devastated if it doesn't happen. But, it would just be so positive if it did. That would be the final Infinity Stone to just make this the perfect offseason. And we'd all be really excited to just be running it back in addition to Mikal rather than having to figure out how we're going to adjust to something that we don't.
Shaun, quick follow-up for you. Where is your confidence level in Mitchell Robinson if he once again is the guy for the Knicks at the 5? Where's your confidence level?
I have the utmost confidence in Mitchell Robinson. I think that I've been saying since his rookie year when he was number 26 that Knicks basketball is better when Mitchell Robinson is on the floor. And so I'm very confident in what he brings to us. And it's just a matter of him staying healthy, which, isn't really up to him. But if Mitch is able to stay healthy and he's able to be out there on the floor, he's the best offensive rebounder in the NBA. He's an amazing anchor defensively. He makes everything go for us. His energy, and you see how much we miss him every time he's not out there. So I have the utmost confidence in Mitchell Robinson moving forward.
All right. Thank you, Shaun. Speaking of health, let's talk a little bit about Julius Randle. Ian, coming to you. What does the Julius Randle trade mean for the Knicks?
Well, he hasn't been traded yet, Chelsea, but I think some of our audience probably got excited when you said that, and others were upset.
Sorry, guys.
Excited.
Sorry, guys. I didn't mean to sound the alarms there.
Randle, as far as his health goes, he said recently that he'll be ready once the season starts, and that's obviously great news for the Knicks. But I think if you remember, last year he was coming off an injury, and he wasn't able to really do what he usually does all offseason in terms of playing basketball. And early on, his shot was off, and then eventually he found his rhythm in a big way, and he really started to play well. So maybe you could see that pattern repeating itself this year if, he's not able to do what he wants to do in the offseason because of this rehab. Maybe he starts the season off a little bit slowly. But listen, the depth here is key. And so if Randle can't get it going early, you would think that there is plenty on the floor to pick him up there offensively. I mean, Dante DiVincenzo, if he's coming off the bench, he's going to be a fantastic player off the bench for the Knicks. So a lot of different permutations for the lineups, but having Randle back and Randle healthy, I think is a big one for New York.
Yeah, Shaun, coming to you, do you think that Julius Randle is a great fit for this squad? Like, what would you do with Julius Randle?
I think that Julius is certainly a great fit on this squad. I think that people take for granted or maybe don't pay attention to what he did for us in January. Everybody keeps talking about how the Knicks played after he got hurt and how we fit so well and how we looked better without him. But we were 14-2 in January, and we were running over teams, and he and Jalen were both scoring 30 points every single night. He was doing a really good job of, and probably the best I've seen him in his career so far, of getting into the paint, touching the paint, drawing the defense, and kicking out to create opportunities for others. So now having this perfect lineup around him, kind of being able to fit in, he balled in. There was a key moment where Jalen missed a couple games earlier in the season, and when he came back, Julius said, "It's nice to have the head of the snake back." And so, he's really kind of accepted this role as, Jalen is the guy. and he's fit in perfectly. He's able to get his numbers. He's able to score. He's able to hit the boards. He's able to get assists. I just think that if he's able to commit defensively, and I think that in a lineup with Mikal Bridges and OG Anunoby and Mitchell Robinson behind you, it's tough to not be the guy who's not committing defensively. So I think if Julius Randle commits defensively, we're going to see an amazing season out of him. I think he's a perfect fit.
Yeah, I agree with Shaun. You're preaching to the choir, my man, because, this is a guy, let's not forget, maybe all-star team 3 out of the last 4 years. And Julius Randle, look, I understand the body language sometimes is a bad optic. We've seen that over the last couple of years, and when he's struggling, maybe things aren't going that well for him, he wears it on his sleeve. But you also got to remember something else, guys. This is going to be, hands down, the most talented team that Julius Randle has ever played with in the NBA. Hands down. And there are championship aspirations for this team. And, as Shaun said, go back to January when everybody was healthy. Mitchell Robinson wasn't even healthy then in January. But when you had OG Anunoby, you had Brunson, you had Randle, the Knicks were as successful and playing better than any team in the NBA. And, we were kind of joking about it last week on the radio that, I'm part of that team, run it back. Let's run it back for the Knicks in this offseason. Now, they went out and got Mikal Bridges. Okay, that'll fit, I think, really, really well. But I'm not in for one of these, let's do a big shakeup and you got to trade Julius Randle because now it's no. I mean, the more the merrier, and I think that he'll find a way to fit in perfectly. I'm not sitting here saying you got to sign him to some massive long-term extension yet, but at least for the upcoming season, a Julius Randle being part of this team makes the Knicks a heck of a lot better.
Yeah, I agree. And he is extension eligible. And so is Jalen Brunson. So, Ian, coming to you, what is the latest on a Jalen Brunson contract extension?
Yeah, nothing new in terms of developments, but I still believe, and I'm confident in saying that he will be willing to listen to the Knicks on the extension offer. He's open to it. He, in his last contract, he did a descending deal, which gave the Knicks some financial flexibility over the life of the contract because it gave them more cap space in years 2, 3, and 4, more money to spend or less team salary, I should say. And then, if he does this deal, which max is, I believe 4 years, $156 million, he's leaving a lot on the table. If you look at the 3-year comparison between his potential free agent deal and the extension, I think it's $30+ million that he's leaving on the table. So that's significant. I'm sorry, I think it might be more than that. Anyway, it's significant. And so it would give the Knicks more flexibility with this second apron thing because you don't want to be over the second apron. If you're any contending team, it severely limits what you can do to acquire players. So it really handicaps you. So the idea of him taking less potentially to come back here and giving the Knicks, a significant financial break would be big in the big picture for this club because it would allow them to more easily add players to the roster.
Yeah, and I definitely can see him doing that. Ian, we do have a fan question, and this one is from Godflow Flawless Leon Official. That's a name right there. I like that. Their question is, what about this CP3 noise we're hearing?
CP3 noise.
Noise, yeah.
Yeah. I would say wherever you're hearing that noise from, you turn the volume down because Chris Paul, he's not coming to New York. They don't have the money to sign him. I think he probably ends up in Los Angeles, would be my guess, with the Lakers. But I don't think the Knicks would have the money to get him here because they'll have a $5 million exception. And that will go, if Hartenstein leaves, that will go towards a center, backup center. Now, look, if Hartenstein stays, takes a lot less money and stays, they have that $5 million exception. They could offer it to a player like Chris Paul, so maybe that's a different conversation. But in this Hartenstein scenario, I just don't think they'll have the resources to get him. And I do think that, Lakers will be right there for him once he starts to consider teams now that he's a free agent.
All right. No CP3 noise over this way, Ian says. Dan, coming to you, what are your thoughts on a possible Jalen Brunson contract extension?
Oh, was that me? You cut out, Chelsea. I'm sorry for a second.
Oh, sorry, yeah. Dan. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, look, it would be great, and it would just kind of speak to the type of player that Jalen Brunson is, selfless, really team-oriented. And Ian was talking about it, the difference in the money. And as he said, he could sign this summer for up to $156 million. If he waits till next year, you're talking about, he could max out at 5 for $258. So that's over $100 million difference if he just has to wait 12 months. Look, Jalen Brunson, he's confident in his abilities. He knows that the money is going to be pouring in here. The Knicks value him. He wants to be here. He knows how much he's beloved in this city. I think that, it just speaks volumes about the type of player that the Knicks acquired, just on the court, off the court, his character, wanting to do what he can for the team. And look, the Knicks hit a home run on this one. No other way around it, guys.
Yeah, I think that they're going to have to build the Jalen Brunson statue after he signs this extension early. I fully believe that he will, and it will show his dedication to the team. And honestly, kudos to Leon Rose and the entire front office, because they saw – I realized what the plan was after the Miami series. When we signed Dante DiVincenzo, some people were pretty upset, and I was just like, what I just saw from that guy in the playoffs, he's the kind of guy that you just make him happy. So it's like whatever he wants, you do. And we doubled down on the power of friendship. And I believe that is honestly probably the best way that you can move in this current NBA with the apron and the tax and the difficulty of adding and acquiring players. Just get a bunch of guys who are friends with each other who won't want to leave. And so I think that now that Jalen Brunson's in a situation where he's got all the support around him, he's got his friends here, he's going to make it so that everybody else can get paid. I fully expect him to take the extension. I mean, that's pocket watching kind of, right? I apologize. I take that back. I can't say I fully expect him to do anything with his money. But, I will not be surprised when Jalen Brunson signs the extension, and it will be what he's doing for the Knicks. And I think we need to add that to the story when we do his 30 for 30 and put his statue up.
Listen, pay Jalen Brunson all the money. He's earned every single ounce of it. Ian, I just want to ask you quickly about Tom Thibodeau. So he is eligible for a contract extension as well. What's the latest on that?
Yeah, it's still coming, I think. I haven't heard anything that led me to believe that it's not coming. I just thought logically that it would be done by now, that it would have been maybe their first order of business after the season. Obviously, it's not. Clearly, they've been focused on the draft and free agency and potential trades, but it's still happening. It was a little surprising that Maurice Cheeks, big-name coach, longtime assistant, he was added to Thibodeau's staff before Thibodeau got his extension. That order there was a little, I don't want to say confusing. It wasn't confusing. It was just surprising. But Thibodeau and Cheeks are very close. I don't think that has anything to do with Thibodeau's future. He's here. He's going to be here for several years. It's just a matter of length of the extension, and it will get done probably after free agency at this point.
Yeah, Shaun, what are your thoughts on what Thibodeau has been able to do with the Knicks during his 4 seasons?
Tibbs has been phenomenal. There's probably some people that are surprised to hear me say that or feel like I'm lying based on some past transgressions, but those were darker days. But ultimately, 3 out of the 4 years we've been to the playoffs. That's the first time. I'll be 30 in August. And as a Knicks fan, I feel like that's the first time I can say that in this millennium for sure. And he's developed players. Even you look at the players that aren't here anymore, the way he's getting guys paid. I think he's done a great job of development of younger players, doing a great job of getting everybody on the team, on the roster to buy in. And, you can tell that these guys love him. They keep doing these votes with these other players saying he's the last player they want to play for. But I don't think anybody on our team would rather play for anyone else. So I'm excited to see him get his extension. It's fully deserved. And I can't wait to see what he does moving forward.
I'm glad you brought that up, Shaun. I really am. Because that poll, you know what that tells me? That's a whole bunch of players in the league that don't care about winning. Right, because all the Knicks have done since Tom Thibodeau's taken over as the head coach is win. You see the chemistry this team has built, the locker room, the camaraderie. I think that the coach has something to do with that. And look, as Ian was saying, I'm a little bit surprised that this hasn't been taken care of already. I thought that was going to be, business under the business line number one in the offseason for things to tend to for the Knicks was to reward Tom Thibodeau because he's deserved it. They built the right culture here. They built the foundation. You see how that building is rocking, especially in the postseason. And they're going to be heading into this year with, I don't want to say a target on their back necessarily, but one of a handful of teams that has a legitimate shot probably to win that championship. And, if you can't give credit to Tom Thibodeau for that, who can you give credit to?
Yeah, Thibodeau has been absolutely phenomenal, and he's so deserving of a contract extension. I agree with all of you. Ian, coming to you, though, with some smaller moves. The Knicks picked up the team option on Jericho Sims, but declined to extend a qualifying offer to Precious Achiuwa. What went into those moves?
Yeah, that was bookkeeping essentially because the Knicks, every dollar matters right now for them for the reasons we talked about with the apron and the hard cap and all that. And if you extended the qualifying offer to Achiuwa, you have him on your books for, I think, around $6 million. And that would have just eaten into any space that they had between where they were and the apron. And if you're trying to, make moves and you don't want that number on your books if it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, Dan, what's your reaction to those moves with them picking up the team option on Sims, but not extending the qualifying offer to Achua?
Yeah, there's some dollars and cents in it, as Ian said. But the Precious thing, look, Precious, I give him credit for what he was able to do for this team. He was essentially, I hate to use the word throw-in, but, OG Anunoby was the main piece coming back from Toronto. But when Precious was called upon this year, even in the playoffs, in a couple of instances, I thought that he distinguished himself well. But, Precious is a player that has limitations, right? Since he's been in the league, and he was a first-round pick once upon a time. He was actually taking a spot ahead of Tyrese Maxey once upon a time in the draft. But, he really isn't somebody that's developed an offensive game to where you feel confident giving him major minutes. And Jericho Sims also, I think that, he had himself a real opportunity. I thought down the stretch this season, even into the playoffs with all the injuries and the guys dropping like flies, to where, he really could have made a mark, I think, for him on this basketball team. But I think that the coaches are certainly still a little bit reserved in trusting him totally. And, I don't know if necessarily he is going to make that leap, at least before this season. But, I hope Precious Achiuwa gets some good money elsewhere. But like I said, I think that his role was pretty much defined when the season ended.
Yeah, Shaun, what are your thoughts on the Knicks moving on from Precious Achiuwa?
I just want to say that I appreciate Precious. Precious stepped up at a time we really needed him. We were very depleted, and he had some very good stretches of games. He also had some not so good stretches of games. I would like to focus on the positives in this moment, and so if he weren't to come back, we appreciate and wish him the best moving forward. Once a Knick, always a Knick. The vibes. And if he's able to make it back after this financial maneuvering, then we appreciate him as a depth piece and knowing that he'll be ready to go if he's called upon.
All right. I agree with you. I like that take. Thank you, Shaun. All right, guys. It is time for a new segment called The C-Note. This is just a little piece of my mind. So as free agency rolls around, the odds may shift, but it's clear that the Knicks are a top contender. According to FanDuel, the Knicks are at plus 900 to win the NBA title, which may seem like a long shot, but it's the fourth best odds in the NBA to hoist the Larry O'Brien trophy at the end of the year. So, Ian, how do you think the Knicks stack up among some of the best in the association?
Look, yeah, if they're healthy, they're right there. And I think you're going to see them win a lot of regular season games because that's Tom Thibodeau's MO. He has his team playing hard in November, in December, in March, throughout the NBA season. So they should win a lot of games in the regular season if healthy. And then you look at the playoffs, and it seems like they're set up for success there too because of the defense. If Mitchell Robinson's healthy, you have Anunoby, you have Bridges. That's really strong in terms of defense in your starting five. And then Dante DiVincenzo off the bench. We saw what he could do last year as a starter. If he brings that off the bench, it's going to be even more difficult for teams. So they should be, right there with Boston in the East. And let's see what Philadelphia does. But they should be right there with those teams if they're healthy. And obviously, health you can't control for.
Yeah, Dan, what are your thoughts on how the Knicks stack up among some of the best in the league?
Well, I'll put it to you this way. And look, we're just getting going here on the summer, and I know the teams are going to be making moves, trying to upgrade and improve and everything. But right now, from where I see it, guys, they're the second best team in the Eastern Conference. And when was the last time, as a Knicks fan, going into the season, that you could say, hands down, the Knicks are no worse than the second best team in the Eastern Conference? Probably since there was a guy named Jordan that was wearing a red uniform and he was still playing back in the 90s. That's probably the last time that you could say that hands down. And that's a reason to be excited if you're a Knicks fan, what this front office has done, the players that they've stockpiled, and really the culture that they've built at Madison Square Garden. Expectations are sky high, and I think the only downside, guys, is that there's not going to be a game now for almost 4 months. I wish we could get the season going next week.
I'm with you. Shaun, what do you think?
I agree with Dan. I wish we could start the season immediately. Honestly, this suspense is going to kill me. But I'm going to say it right now. The Knicks will be the first seed in the Eastern Conference. We'll be the number 1 seed. I said before this season we'd be a top 3 seed, maybe not 3. We ended up at 2. We got the 50 wins. I want us to stay healthy. I think what's also good about the Mikal acquisition is honestly perfect, both on and off the floor. I think that national media is kind of, some people are like, oh, the Knicks they got marginally better. It's you having 2 long-range defensive wings next to Jalen Brunson and having Mitchell Robinson anchor is such a beautiful setup. And not only that, but OG's issue at times has been durability. So over the course of the season, he may miss some games, and then you just slide Mr. Reliable, a.k.a. Mikal Bridges, over into the 3 slot. You start Dante DiVincenzo, and you don't miss a beat. And so I think this team's very well constructed for the long haul. I like us to win between 55 and 60 games and be the 1 seed. And then the playoffs, I think in my heart of hearts, even without Julius Randle, if OG stays healthy, Josh Hart stays healthy, I think we beat the Celtics this season. Of course, there's no point in saying that now. It's over. They won the championship. I'm not going to be a loser and talk about it the rest of my life. But moving forward, I don't think that we're inferior to the Celtics. I didn't think so this season. I don't think so going into next year. And I can't wait to actually show that to people.
All right. Shaun with a take. Knicks, number 1 seed next season. We're going to have to revert back to this video when it happens. Yeah, I appreciate that. I like that, Shaun. Ian, coming to you quickly. Reports right now are that the Oklahoma City Thunder are meeting with Isaiah Hartenstein in Oregon. For those just joining us, please refresh us on the Hartenstein situation, including this news.
Yeah, so the Knicks can offer Isaiah Hartenstein a maximum of $16 million in the first year, maximum of 4 years, $72 million overall. They're limited to that because they have Hartenstein's early bird rights. He's been on the team for 2 years. Other teams with cap space, like the Thunder, like the Magic, like the Pistons, can come in way over the top on that offer and can really dwarf that offer because they don't have any limitations on what they can offer Hartenstein. And we've been talking about it. We reported earlier that the expectation is that multiple teams will have offers for Hartenstein. Multiple cap space teams will have offers for Hartenstein. And I think at least one of them will be longer term. So, he's going to have a lot to think about. But that dynamic is the reason why it's been unlikely that Hartenstein comes back to New York. He could take a big haircut and come back to the Knicks, but he'd be leaving a lot of money on the table. And I think even people in that Knicks locker room, they would love to have him back. They'd say, Isaiah, come on back if you want to, but don't leave money on the table because they understand that this is, a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for a player who is hitting free agency at the exact right time, coming off a great season, not a big center market. And so I don't think anyone would fault him for taking advantage of that position.
Yeah, great perspective there. Thank you, Ian, for that. Reverting a bit away from the Knicks right now, Ian, a lot of people around the league are calling this summer the summer of Paul George. He's going to have to make a huge decision on where he's going to play next. Of course, the 76ers are one of those teams that could acquire him. How could that shake things up in the East if Paul George were to go to Philadelphia?
Yeah, it makes the 76ers dangerous, I think. If George is healthy and if Joel Embiid is healthy, and then you have him and Tyrese Maxey, the two of them and Tyrese Maxey, that's tough. That's a really good top 3. So, yeah, it's certainly something that Knicks fans should keep an eye on. The other thing is, I think Philadelphia, we mentioned it earlier, they were looking at ways coming into free agency of how they could open up even more cap space, maybe waiving a player on a non-guaranteed deal in order to get enough money to go after another top player on the market. Maybe it's Kentavious Caldwell-Pope. I know Orlando was in on him too. Maybe it's DeMar DeRozan. So there are avenues for them to open up enough money to go out and get 2 bigger name players. And then, big guy, I think they'll be in on Andre Drummond as well. So a lot to keep an eye on from a Knicks fan's perspective about what's happening in the city of brotherly love.
Yeah, and Dan, we've been talking a lot about the Celtics and where the Knicks stack up with them, but if the Philadelphia 76ers do acquire Paul George, what could that mean for the Knicks from your perspective?
Look, on paper, they look like a flashy little team. And, if you work in the ticket office or the marketing department for the Sixers, you get those posters up with Paul George and Maxey and Embiid and splash them all over Philadelphia, come to the arena, buy tickets, all that stuff. But, look, Paul George has an injury history. Joel Embiid is always hurt. There's only one basketball that could go around, which means you take shots away from Tyrese Maxey, who has certainly come into his own. So, like I said, in theory, it's nice, but is it going to work and is it going to be the right fit? So Plainly speaking, guys, I'm not really losing a heck of a lot of sleep over it yet because I want to see how it plays out over 82 games, then potentially into the playoffs. Paul George, Joel Embiid, they haven't won anything yet in their NBA careers. Neither one of them have been to the finals.
Valid point. Shaun, what are your thoughts?
Once again, Dan makes excellent points. They can do all that. They can plaster all the posters around the city, and we'd still outnumber them in their own building. So they've got some work to do there. And I think that and the way that I feel about this, maybe if we hadn't gotten Mikal Bridges, I'd be a little bit more worried. But I just think that this is a perfect illustration of how well this trade works for us, because you put Mikal on Tyrese Maxey, you put OG on Paul George, and all of a sudden I'm not too worried about anything, And like Dan said, their injury history, so they're going to have to make it through the 82-game gauntlet, just as we are. But I'm not afraid of what we'd be seeing. They'd be a better team for sure, but they're not anybody who would make me lose any sleep.
Shaun, I'm liking this energy that you're coming with, man. We're going to have to work together some more soon. I like this. Guys, let's go around the horn just a little bit. Yes, I think so too. So OG Anunoby has agreed to a 5-year deal. Mikal Bridges traded to the Knicks. Shaun, let's start with you here. On the whole, what would constitute a successful offseason for the Knicks?
Well, the offseason is already successful. The offseason, honestly, is a dream come true already. When I got the notification that Mikal is a Knick, I swore I was checking, I'm making sure it's not a fake page. I'm trying to figure out how I got the notification. And it was real. Then I had to make sure I was awake, and then because I've been wanting this. I wanted it so badly that I didn't think it could happen. I didn't think the Nets would trade with us. I think we paid the extra tax of, the crosstown rival embarrassment tax. Gave them a couple extra picks, but I'm fine with that. We kept all of our players. We kept our core. We were able to add to it. And we brought OG back, so we have the 2 defensive wings. If we get iHeart back, it's the perfect offseason. I also thought draft night was excellent. The maneuvering, which we've become used to on draft night at this point, of just, moving around and maximizing what we can get as far as value, adding Tyler Kolek in the second round. I think that was a great job on draft night. So between free agency, trades, draft night, I think everything about an offseason we've executed well. And I look forward to seeing us be able to, put the icing on the cake with Isaiah Hartenstein. But even if not, it's still a great offseason.
Dan, what do you think?
Yeah, I'm just going to piggyback off of what Shaun said there. If you get Hartenstein back, that would be the dream scenario. Maybe even throw in Brunson agreeing to that extension, which, saves the team a little bit of money. And, he loses out on a little bit, but he'll make up for it in droves moving forward, of course, even off the court when it comes to Madison Avenue and merchandising and marketing and all those type of things. But if you're a Knicks fan right now, and this is even before the official quote-unquote period has just gotten going here, I think that you have to be over the moon with what Leon Rose and company have done so far.
Yeah. So, Ian, Shaun and Dan say this is successful already this offseason. But for you, from your perspective, what would constitute a successful offseason for the Knicks? Obviously, we're waiting for the Hartenstein news.
Yeah, look, I'm the biggest cynic out there. I think that's just when you're a reporter, that's your nature. So I'm always waiting for the other shoe to drop. But I think no matter where you come from, you have to look at this offseason as a very strong play by the New York Knicks. Look, they could do nothing, and it would still be very good. I do think they'll look for that backup big if they lose Hartenstein. That's obviously their last big domino. But again, I'm going to assume that Hartenstein leaves because of the financials. But, if he doesn't, that's great. If he does, you got to get a backup big. But what they've done to this point, the draft, Bridges, Anunoby, let's see how they add to that Bridges deal to get out from under the hard cap. But, yeah, there are some big steps taken here by Leon Rose and his group. And, look, if everybody's healthy, they should be a really good team next year.
Yeah, the energy is incredible. The culture is incredible. And of course, we joke a lot about them being the Villanova Knicks, but those guys won together in college and they know how to win and they're winners. And I think the Knicks are setting themselves up for a great season next year. All right, so that will do it for the Putback. Our thanks to Dan Graca. Be sure to catch him on the Dan Graca Show weeknights on ESPN Radio, 98.7 FM. And thank you so much to Shaun Gettys. Follow him at I Hate Shaun and follow him on the Knicks Wall. Plenty more NBA coverage to come. Ian will be on Honda Sports Night tonight at 11 p.m. on SNY, and that's running throughout the night and into the morning. Plus, so much more coverage is on SNY.tv. For Ian Begley, I'm Chelsea Sherrod. Thanks so much for watching The Putback, and we'll see you guys soon.